Je vois que tout le monde a l'air d'être bien installé. Cher Dr Wang, cher Dr Miao, chers amis, bonjour à tous. Bienvenue à ce séminaire qui clôture les activités de l'année 2025.
Good morning. We have some technical problem, so could you please wait for a few minutes? The interpreter cannot hear anything.
Et il a organisé cette année diverses activités de nature gastronomique. Désormais, également ce séminaire sur l'avenir du multilatéralisme en collaboration avec le Center for China and Globalization, que nous remercions pour leur accueil chaleureux au sein de cette magnifique CCG House. Et dans le contexte géopolitique actuel, les organisations multilatérales font face à des défis sans précédent qui nécessitent une réflexion collective sur l'avenir du multilatéralisme. Et nous sommes convaincus qu'il est intéressant de tenir cette réflexion dans le contexte de la francophonie d'une part, afin de profiter de la diversité des points de vue des divers membres qui la composent, et d'autre part, ici, à Pékin, un rôle prépondérant des institutions multilatérales. Je souhaiterais...
Okay. President Wang Huiyao, distinguished guests, Your Excellencies, good morning. Welcome to today's seminar.
Your Excellency Bruno Argilet, Ambassador of Chair of the Group of the Francophone, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors of Francophone countries, distinguished guests, experts, chers amis, Madame, Monsieur, bonjour. First of all, on behalf of the Center for China and Globalization, I would like to extend a warm welcome to ambassadors and our distinguished guests and CCG Beijing Academy. It is really a great honor to gather here, old and new, and also in this sunshine morning to discuss the important topic, the future of multilateralism. So just days ago, we just witnessed a successful state visit of President Emmanuel Macron to China. This visit not only reconfirmed the resilience of Sino-French relations, but also highlighted the strategic importance of our dialogue. Similarly, we have renewed engagement with partners in North America, marked by a recent visit of Canada Foreign Minister in October. Those high-level interactions confirm that China maintains a strong, constructive ties with key global North countries of Francophone. At the same time, our bond with the Francophone North is also very strong. The Francophone world is the home to some of the most dynamic and prosperous nations in Africa and also in the global North. The Belgian ambassador just told me that we have 50-some Francophone countries and quite a large number are in Africa, but also in different other parts of the world. China is deeply engaged with those nations, working side by side on a modernization and development path. CCG profoundly cherish our long-standing friendship with Group of Francophone Ambassadors, GAF. I remember looking back on October 8, 2021, CCG has the honor of hosting the first Francophone dialogue with the ambassadors in China. I remember that year that was hosted by the country of Switzerland, the Embassy of Switzerland, organized together with CCG. We actually, on that occasion, we explored in depth on how to strengthen cooperation in the field of sustainable development in the post-pandemic era. Later, on October 14, 2022, we once again joined in hands with the Embassy of Tunisia and also with the group of Francophone ambassadors to host an ambassador roundtable focusing on the digital development and cooperation for a more sustainable world. Those dialogues stand as a testament to the deep trust and cooperation among us. So this is really a great group, and it's a great occasion to discuss all those topics. At CCG, we strongly believe in that commitment requires action. Our decision to a global dialogue is not just a promise. For example, in 2024, the last year alone, we undertook 15 international visits spanning Asia, North America, Europe, Africa, and Oceania, visiting 34 cities in 22 countries. And this year, we also did the same. We just come back from G20 in Johannesburg, and I was just returned 2 days ago from Doha from Qatar. So we committed to be a bridge and also setting a new dialogue path for promoting China and outside world. So today, as we gather here at the CCG Academy, we hope to explore new space for future cooperation, particularly on the future of multilateralism. The international organization of La Francophone is truly unique. Its vast membership does not just exist on the map. It spans the economic spectrum, bridging the global north and global south. This distinguished structure makes this organization a natural and a vital bridge connecting the developed and developing countries. From our perspective as a think tank, we see this unique diversity as a tremendous opportunity. It opens the door for a new kind of a cross-regional and cross-cultural cooperation. As the world's largest developing nation, China has always remained steadfast in its solidarity with global South. Yet, at the same time, we actively seek constructive, forward-looking, and also engagement with developed nations. And we maintain a relatively improved relation as far as we can see now. Therefore, we advocate for an involved new trend, which is maybe we could build up a trilateral partnership. What does this mean? So we envision the possibility of aligning our efforts. For example, China can leverage its, as the largest developing countries, utilize China's infrastructure capability and address the real needs of the developing world, including the green technology. We'll also look at other green transition, digital economy, and potential synergy that is immense. By directing those combined strengths towards the specific development needs of the host countries, we hope to create a win-win situation. And of course, global North Francophone countries have capital, has the know-how, has the historical influence, has also the image, also familiar with the law and the religion and also local conditions. It's a natural partner that can work with China. And the vast global North Francophone countries has the also big potential, has the also the growth market, vibrant and a very young population, and huge cooperation possibilities. So I think that China, Francophone countries, Francophone North, Francophone South can really work together on this trilateral great cooperation for sustaining a future, including a more pragmatic, inclusive, and results-driven, that in the spirit of modern multilateralism. So to conclude, I hope this seminar will really have a very stimulating dialogue, discussions. We have all the great minds here, and we hope to really generate a lot of good proposals, good discussions, good ideas, and also we would like to really document that and really promote that. So we hope this new vitality that injected today will be really another push for the China Francophone countries cooperation. So So once again, thank you all and appreciate all your coming this morning. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Dr. Wang, pour ces mots d'introduction.
Thank you very much, Dr. Henry Wang. And now I'd like to pass the floor to the Ambassador of Belgium, His Excellency Bruno Angeli, Ambassador of Belgium on behalf of GAF. Dear colleagues, dear students, first I want to thank you. I want to thank Dr. Henry Huiyao for hosting us at the beautiful CCG Beijing Academy for this seminar. And also I want to welcome the students. You are majors in international relations. I believe you will learn a lot from the seminar. And also I want to thank our MC, who is a CGT and anchor woman too, and also an old friend of the GAF. Actually, the Francophone group is a big family. We spread across different continents. We have 5 groups, actually, for example, the sub-Saharan African countries. And we should not forget this fact: the largest Franco country is not France. It is the Diplomatic Republic of the Congo. And we have 16 European Francophone countries. And the third group is the Arab Francophone countries. And the fourth group is the North American group, represented by the Haiti and Saint Lucian, and Canada, of course. In the fifth group, we have Vietnam, Cambodia, the Laos, and Vanuatu, which are in the east of Asia. So you can see our cultural diversity. Some of them are big countries or smaller ones. So I think that is the charm of the Francophone group. Today we are talking about the future of multilateralism. I'm looking forward to diverse views on this topic and a heated debate, because we come from different parts of the world. Naturally, we will have different ideas. And the Francophone group, as an organization, we have regular meetings. And in Beijing, we also organize some activities to promote French to the Chinese communities and the French culture to the Chinese communities. So here I want to say thank you to you all for your presence, and thank you for witnessing our openness and inclusiveness and diversity. I want to thank the Senegal ambassador and the African ambassadors delegation under your leadership, and also the ambassador of Morocco. I know that different countries have different ideas. You cannot represent a unified idea of Africa. And we also have the ambassador of Canada, Jennifer, and we also have the ambassador of Luxembourg. So I welcome you all, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. So we will now come directly to the topic, and we will start the debate. I think we will go directly to the discussion. So we can have discussions, and after that we will have the lunch. And now I'd like to give the floor to the moderator, Madam Zhang Shanghui, anchorwoman of CGTN and also a column writer of CCG Journal. And we have the ambassadors of Luxembourg, Canada, and some other ambassadors. Also, please come to the stage for the panel discussion.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. Today we welcome all the colleagues and the experts and teachers and students to come to the beautiful venue, CCG Beijing Academy. I believe this is your first time to be this beautiful venue. I think you can understand that for the whole academy, the structure is very perfect for this discussion. Today, we're going to discuss a very urgent, imperative topic, that is multilateralism. My name is Zhang Xiaohui. I'm from CGTN. I'm the moderator for CGTN and also the CCG consultant. So today it is my great honor to be here to moderate this panel discussion. Our discussion will be very open and free. We will respect each other in the spirit of mutual respect and mutual understanding to discuss the multilateralism. Speaking of multilateralism, we talk about the transformation, the global challenges and opportunities. First of all, I'd like to invite the 4 ambassadors to share with us their insights. Each of them will have 2 minutes. And after that, we will move on to the debate. First, we would like to invite the ambassador of Luxembourg, red light. He will be the first speaker. Luxembourg is a very important country in the global economy, especially in EU. In trade policies, Luxembourg has a very important place to play. Thank you very much. And dear colleagues, His Excellency, I'd like to thank the organizer for this event. Also, I'd like to thank Dr. Wang and Mabel. Thank you very much for your efforts. Luxembourg, the country itself, in 1945, we signed the UN chapter. We were the smallest country because we are very small. We have to uphold multilateralism. Madam Zhang, you just mentioned that we rely on imports, and our production of our exports, especially our finance service. Our partners are in various sectors, including trade and finance. They're in all around the world. So we can say that we are a nature believer of multilateralism because we have to believe in multilateralism. We are too small not to do that. Luxembourg is an advocate of UN Charter, and also at the moment, at present, and in the future, we are a very important contributor to UN. It is a pity that Luxembourg is the only country that respects the 1962 commitment. That is, we contribute 0.7% of our GDP to our people's livelihood, and ever since then we have kept 1% of our GDP to improving people's livelihood. In this respect, we have been an advocate also the development of countries speaking French, especially in Western Africa, including Senegal. This is a brief introduction, and I think the moderator will have questions for me. We are a small country, but we are very open. We are actively promoting multilateralism. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for your introduction. That is very meaningful and very significant. Now let me give the floor to the Ambassador of Canada, Jennifer May, to talk about Canada's perspective on multilateralism and their practices. Thank you very much, Madam Zhang, for your introduction. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Wang and also to thank the Ambassador of Belgium. Today, it is a very great gathering. I think we have this opportunity to have a free debate and sharing what is the future of multilateralism. And we're discussing in French. Why are we discussing this topic today? Because in the future, and the future has been, we are at the crossroad of history, or multilateralism. Multilateralism in French is very different for me. Multilateralism is not as it was before, as mentioned by the Ambassador of Luxembourg. UN Charter was signed in 1945. It was signed in 1945. Now we need more innovation and be true to reality. We know that we're going to redefine multilateralism and to build the multilateral system for Canada. In the multilateral system, we have many opportunities. We are looking for some methods to strengthen our connection with other countries, especially those countries speaking French or those GAF countries. Now, to the topic, how can we uphold the multilateralism and so that multilateralism can be sustaining? Thank you, Ambassador. Now let me give the floor to the Ambassador of Morocco. We know that Morocco is located between Europe and Africa. It plays a very important role. So I would like to have your insights on multilateralism. Good morning. 2 minutes is not enough, so I try to be brief. Distinguished Excellencies, Dr. Wang and Madam Miao and Madam Zhang, I'm very impressed by this academy. It is very beautiful, and I would like to thank you for your tour just now. I will speak in 1 minute about my perspectives. When I was young, I was working in the Ministry of Diplomacy, Foreign Relations. I was involved in the discussion. We're discussing what is the meaning of multilateralism in New York, in Geneva. People read books. Is that what multilateral means? Actually, bilateral is very important. But another person said, I do not agree. Multilateralism is not about reading books. It's not as simple as that. Multilateralism is when we make very important decisions that matter to our future. It involves international organizations. I was young now, 30 years has passed. Ministry of I was talking with my colleague in the ministry, and I was told, what are you doing in China? It's all decisions are made in New York, by New York. The meetings in New York are most important, like a Security Council meetings. They're most important because they make decisions. This is a fact. But do you know that now many people are asking the same question? What is the real multilateralism, and does it matter, and does it even exist? We can discuss this topic. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. And today, through this very interesting story, we can have more discussions. What does multilateralism mean in Beijing, in China? Does it mean anything? So now we'd like to invite the ambassador from Senegal, Ambassador Sirla. And Senegal plays a very important role in Africa. Senegal is a very important country in Africa, and also is a very important country in Belt and Road Initiative. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And
I also want to thank the ambassador for inviting me to the CCG Beijing Academy. For this very important seminar, I want to thank Dr. Henry Wang for giving us this opportunity to talk freely in French in this beautiful space. So, congratulations, Ambassador. You have played a very active role in the Francophone organization. You gave us a lot of opportunities to think about what is the future of multilateralism. In our organization, we want to remind the Francophone countries of our importance in promoting multilateralism, and I also want to extend my welcome to the students from the China Foreign Affairs University. Today, we are using the French language, which is an official language of the United Nations. We know that General de Gaulle said that the 5 official languages of the United Nations must include French. And at that time, the representative was Pompidou, who insisted on English and French. And probably it is not about our arrogance. I want to say that Senegal has also been working actively for multilateralism in New York. I used to be Senegal's counselor to the United Nations. I was responsible for multilateralism-related topics. Portuguese, Chinese, and Spanish shall be translated at the United Nations so that everyone can get the message. I think first we need to define what is multilateralism. Different people have different perspectives. For example, after World War II, for the African countries, at that time we were not independent. In 1945, we were in the struggle. However, after many countries got independence, we joined the United Nations because we believed in the importance of an international organization and its role in upholding peace and security. And decades on, we can see that multilateralism has become part of our life. But we have different definitions of multilateralism. To many countries, multilateralism is just a tool for authoritarianism. It is just a tool of power. In a book, about peace and war, the author said that we need to use multilateralism to review peace and war. So I think first we need to give a proper definition of multilateralism and how to analyze the true function of multilateralism. Just now, Dr. Henry Hui Yao talked about the Global South and Global North. And I think Moroccan ambassador and me are from the Global South, and the other two ambassadors are from the Global North. And probably that is a conflict of globalism. I think that in turn provides a great opportunity for dialogue. When we talk about the China-Africa cooperation, Senegal has always been the FOCAC chairman in Africa, and we have been promoting FOCAC cooperation. We have been promoting multilateralism. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Francophone countries are very important. Why we are here for this seminar? Because the Francophone countries' voice is very important because they can provide a new perspective to the world. We still remember a lot of poets from Senegal. They write poems in French, especially on the topic of liberation and anti-colonialism. They have played a very important role. So each one of you has spoken for 2 minutes, respectively. And now I think we can talk about today's multilateralism and the role of different countries and what role can we play in international cooperation and what is our position in the dialogue with China. And last but not least, it will be about the relationship between the Franco countries and the future of multilateralism. So first, how to define multilateralism? A lot of people say that multilateralism is facing crisis and transformation or reorganization. What is your view? Luxembourg ambassador, I think you ask a lot of questions. I don't know how to address each one of your questions because we don't have the time. First, whether multilateralism is still in crisis from our perspective or from the perspective of Europe. Russia's invasion in Ukraine is a shock to us, especially because of the serious violation of the UN Charter. So that is a shock to us. Second, what is the gap to the Sustainable Development Goals? How far away are we from the SDGs? Probably my colleagues have different ideas. We can have the discussion. And we know that the SDG has 17 targets, but today, in 2025, where are we in terms of achieving the SDGs? Actually, we have not been doing a very good job. And we can see that in recent years, there is a trend, especially in Europe. Public development and physical expenditure are actually downsizing. And actually, the United Nations Charter has specific provisions on that, but the number has not been fully respected. At least most of the people failed to respect the required number. But at the same time, we should not be pessimistic, or we should not see this as doomed. Just now we mentioned two crises. We still have a basically functional international system. Most of the UN members are still respecting the international law. Of course, some of the crises, some of the planes are still flying in the air. And so it means that the international law still works. And the OICE, the International Aviation Organization, still works.
Internationale.
So the international organizations ensure that we can have a flight still flying. Also, another example comes from the environmental protection area. Montreal Treaty, Montreal Agreement is about carbon emission reduction, and in UN agreement on combating climate change, we have seen some efforts. So whether the multilateralism is facing challenges, maybe yes, maybe not. There are some areas it is yes, and in some other areas it's still working very well. So for United Nations, it has been in history existing for 18 years. We have to reclaim the multilateralism and also the benefits of multilateralism. And we will try to build a world of multilateralism and build a better framework for multilateralism. Thank you very much. Thank you for your encouraging examples. You have just mentioned the Montreal Agreement. It is related to the Kunming Biology Conference. Kunming and Montreal, the two cities, have joint efforts in organizing this conference. Now the floor is to the ambassador of Morocco. What is your understanding of multilateralism? Multilateralism is about management. It is a management tool. It is a multilateral system. That is my definition. It is a working method. Because we believe that no country or nobody can manage the world alone. We have to work together to manage the international affairs, the global affairs. This is a diversified world. It has been there for thousands of years. But back then, we didn't have ways to communicate. Now it is a globalized world. We are more. We have more convenient to communicate with each other. But we have some negative examples, like in the colonial world, 2 or 3 countries, they dominate and they share the benefits across the world. Multilateralism actually has been there for many, many years. And in the First World War, we found that the war has brought too much damage. Therefore, we advocate to build an international organization. We try to build a multilateral organization. There are 2 pillars. One is a political pillar, the other is a security. After that, we have the Security Council and also the Economic Council. Later on, we have a prison system. I think some people have experienced the First World War and Second World War, but now we are in a new world. Multilateralism is a management system. Therefore, we cannot forget 1945. That is a starting point for today's multilateralism. Its definition and its origin of multilateralism comes from 1945, that is after the Second World War. Now we have seen the trend of unilateralism, which is challenging the global security and peace. We have seen back to like the Security Council. Security Council is restructuring. Why these 5 countries are deciding the fate of all people? There are some new development, like the issue in Gaza and the issue of Palestine. These issues are challenging the multilateralism, and also the United States, the U.S. government. We know that Morocco is actively engaged in all these decisions that will have an impact on the world. For instance, in Security Council of the United Nations, whether we still have a veto or there's a quota, like Luxembourg, our country, Morocco. For countries like us, how can we have impact? How can we influence the decision making? Instead of the major countries and the powers, they decide the fate of our people. So in other words, the international organization, whether they cater to the needs of the 21st century, we need to consider the structure of the international organizations, their weight in different regions, different continents. Now let's talk about the last 20 years. We have seen the success of multilateralism. Like the ambassador of Luxembourg, my friend, has mentioned. But of course, we also have faced some failures. Whether success or failures, we have to ask ourselves. Multilateralism, international organizations, we have so many conferences, we have input so much energy. What are the outcomes? Back to the opening, like this big conference, the seminars, inviting many different countries. But what is the conclusion? And what is the conclusion and how they are applied in our everyday life? So these questions are the one that we're asking ourselves. Like next year, we will have another meeting. Will it be making any difference because it's just 1 or 2 countries make this final decision? Or it can be one superpower, it can be the African Union, it can be the European Union, and China also. can we have more say in international affairs? Can we decide the future? And I have no answer to these questions. I hope the answer is yes. We just want to input more energy into multilateralism. We need to rethink the structure of multilateralism to make it more balanced, to make it reflect more the reality of the world, and also to bring us more opportunities to respond to our existing challenges. And just now you have discussed Ukraine, Palestine. And today, do we have a multilateralism system that is the same as in 1945? Because now the global south is rising and developing countries are increasing their voices. Or from perspective of Canada, what do you think about this emerging powers and the geological politics and the changing? Does the multilateralism change as compared to 1945? I think we agree with each other. The most important question is, as mentioned by the ambassador of Senegal, how do we define multilateralism? We discuss multilateralism, whether it still exists. Now, when you first define the multilateralism, multilateralism is an international order built on rules. We have different participants, different stakeholders. Many people believe that we can choose the rules that cater to their interest, and if not, they will withdraw from the treaty. But that's not true, not right, because you have to accept the benefits and the drawbacks of it to make sure that the system is running very well. Well, for international organizations like the International Aviation Association, you want to buy a air ticket from China. How can you make the Morocco Airlines accept? That is, we have to make sure that everyone is subject to the same rules. What is the problem now? There are some changes. We have noticed that some countries, they do not accept multilateralism, especially the negative side of multilateralism. For Morocco, we believe in multilateralism. We are active in contributing to the international organizations, but some countries try to change it. So we have to find a way out. We have to work together. To empower these international organizations, to make them legitimate, and also to have some reform of these international organizations. Well, Ambassador, I know that you have been in China for many years. For Global South,
est-ce que ceci va-t-elle contribuer à un multilatéralisme et surtout à la construction de vrais
they are experiencing industrialization, and will that contribute to multilateralism development? Of course, sure. Just now I define multilateralism. It has some boundaries, it has some limits. As a member of the Global South, we know that after the Second World War, the new international order
But at that time, African countries and Asian countries were not involved. I think we need to discuss the crisis that multilateralism has faced. Multilateralism, if it can, like United Nations and International Aviation Association, for these particular organizations. Well, some countries, they are designing these organizations, that is the United States. Why are we here? Why are we facing crisis now? The establishment of United Nations was after the Second World War, but its predecessor, it was initiated by, it was the legacy of a president of the United States, Wilson.
A superpower, whatever we call it, its behavior and its concept has changed the international order and its foreign policy. We know that the Monroe Doctrine in 1923 prevented Europe from participating in North American and South Americans' affairs. After President Kennedy, it has been changing gradually. So there is a conflict of these different concepts. What is the role of the European Union? The Security Council of the United Nations is for the sake of security and peace, but President Wilson, not President Wilson, I'm sorry, it's President Roosevelt. He has been promoting some ideas which cannot meet today's demand, but the United States is still promoting the old Monroe Doctrine, that is the isolationism. The U.S. has just launched its national security strategy, and the EU has a civilization crisis, and you need to cooperate more with us. Global South. I don't want to say anything to create conflicts between the Global North and Global South. I don't think the Global North is still a unified group because there is already conflict and between the EU and the US. They are divided in their views on international organizations and even on the Ukrainian war. We can see the divergence of views between the two sides. So we want to talk about international security, which should be the responsibility of the United Nations Security Council. But on many occasions, the U.S. just used a veto. And 90% of them are about Gaza. That simply cannot work. So this structure of 5 countries making the final decision should not go on. The Ukrainian crisis and the nuclear proliferation, which is also threatening the security of all mankind. We have a special partnership with China. Respect for sovereignty. In terms of government governance, we have different approaches. But we believe governance have a big impact on the development models. So I want to repeat these principles, including non-interference in internal affairs of other countries. That was initiated by your first Premier Zhou Enlai. At that time, Premier Zhou Enlai visited all of Africa, and President Jiang Zemin and other leaders all visited Africa. They have been following this principle of respecting others' sovereignty and not interfering in others' internal affairs. We hope that, I want to add that the AU has a 2063 development plan. We hope that we can develop like China, but it cannot be just simply copied. That will not work because we have different environments. And just now, the Moroccan ambassador already said that we need to think about the international economic structure. After World War II, we have the IMF and the World Bank and the Bretton Woods institution, which were all established back then. But do they still work today? We need to talk about that. We need to debate on that. So whether it is a global north and global south, we need to transcend such challenges to reach consensus. Take Ukraine, for example. China came up with peace proposals on many occasions, but the view of the West is that they don't accept that. But China has a huge diplomatic negotiation powers. For example, the reconciliation between Israel and Gaza was accomplished in Beijing. So I think that is multilateralism. We cannot just impose our own idea. We need to engage in candid and open discussions and learn from each other's lessons and experiences. Thank you very much. As I understand it, just now you mentioned the representativeness of the UN Security Council and the framework of multilateralism, and the Global South, for example, African countries should have more say. And the South African countries' representativeness, which is the most important thing that should be reformed to you. Just now you also mentioned representation. For example, some of the countries hope that they will get more say in the United Nations. And Luxembourg ambassador, do you have any idea on this topic with regard to how to improve multilateralism structure? I will just follow up on the ambassador of Senegal. I fully agree that today's system no longer reflects the realities of today's world. 5 countries are using veto powers to decide on any matters that are related to global peace and security. That makes things difficult. We can see the big impact of the Ukraine war on the world. For us, small countries, you know, we represent half of the UN member states. So our country's population is less than 5 million. So the protection of the international law is more important for us small countries than for the big countries. Because for us, we do not have the power to protect ourselves. So when we are invaded, we will have to surrender. But the international law is a hugely important protection instrument for us. And talking about Ukraine, I can say a lot about this because the Ukraine war is just too much of a shock to us. About the UN reform, the representation of small countries, representation of African countries. Of course, should be improved. You all know that this is not the first time for us to talk about the importance and urgency of reforming the United Nations. Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, already saw people talking about how to reform the UN. As the Canadian ambassador just now said, some of the big countries with a huge influence must agree to share its power. That is a huge problem. That is a huge thing. We have a term. It is something like the dilemma of prisoners. We cannot grow by ourselves because that means that the small countries are not able to protect themselves at all. So that is all about the Monroe Doctrine. The other choice is that we cooperate with each other and work together with each other, and each one just constrains its power a little bit and share its power with others instead of competing with each other all the time. We can cooperate in some areas. I think that is the most important thing. I think in this world of growing interdependence and deepening globalization, we can see the case of the Netherlands Xperia company. Climate change is indeed another example. For example, how can AI be better utilized? These three things all point to the fact that we live in a world where we depend on each other. We have no option but to cooperate. So I think I will end my response very fast, so please don't rush. On the reform of the UN Security Council, I think we can increase the importance of the General Assembly of the United Nations so that everybody can have a say. And we can also reform the UN Security Council. We do not have a magic wand, but probably others have this magic wand. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing these interesting ideas. I'm not rushing you, actually, but I think it reminds me of one thing, one saying in China. So whether a country is small or big, all of the governments need to have the wisdom to govern their own countries. When we are a big country, we need to demonstrate our humanity. And when we are small countries, we also need to do something to cooperate. So I have a question for you, Madam Ambassador. In Canada, you mentioned how to find the space of dialogue as a neighbor of a big power. Especially in the context of your case, we know that President Xi Jinping initiated the Global Governance Initiative. He talked about global governance. So whether the countries are big or small, we need to have good global governance. You support multilateralism. What is the position of Canada in this process? I think in answering this question, we need to go back to the first question. That is to say, we need to be creative in thinking about this question, and at the same time, we need to be pragmatic and practical. It's not that we will find, it's not possible for us to find a magic wand. We need to discuss it, and we need to make adjustment according to realities. For example, whether it is with the United States or with other cooperation partners, that is always the case. And we have found some examples and mechanisms, and they have been working very well. in many cases, probably you cannot see these international organizations because they have always been keeping a low profile, and probably only a low profile approach can make them work. And in the new system, I think I want to mention the Ukraine war again. I feel that when a country invades another sovereign country, no country can accept that. A lot of countries actually have forgotten this principle, and they are just talking about pragmatism. I think we can find some actions beside the principles. And in terms of actions, we have always been looking for cooperation partners, and we have always been open.
In GAF, we have a strong feeling that pragmatism is very important. Many multilateral organizations are not multilateralism, and they are decided by the big powers. But for GAF, we have real partnerships. French is our working language. We have to promote the use of French. That is one example of our pragmatism. This is worth learning, and in some other organizations we can copy and follow the suit. And also in regional cooperation and the North and the South cooperation, we have many shared common interests. We have a consensus where when we can't reach consensus, we can discuss to find a sustainable solution. We should not indulge in the empty talks. While everyone is talking, nothing happens. Thank you very much for your insights, the importance of French language like Morocco.
Intéressant, Monsieur l'ambassadeur du Maroc. Selon vous, aujourd'hui, quels sont
Mr.
les
Ambassador
prioritaires qui vous semblent pertinents?
of Morocco, what do you think is the most important reform? I think I just mentioned the two pillars. One is economy and finance. The other is security. And we can see something's changing, and it's changing the world in finance and trade and economy. We know that the US dollars is one system. The other is EU and euro, accounting for roughly 13% of the trade. The other global currency we are discussing now, we believe that in a few years there will be some outcomes. And for the international banks, the financial institutions, their roles are different from 20 years ago. We know that there are now some new financial institutions. The latest one is called ROSEF, or New Development Bank. I think it can replace the World Bank. The third, G7. G7 decides the fate of the world. But we do not consider only the GDP, G7 or G20. And BRICS countries, they are different. G7, G20 are different from BRICS and different from Global South. Yesterday, we had a working lunch. One lady mentioned the Paris Club, and she asked, why don't we have a borrowers club? Paris Club is a club for the developed countries. We borrow money from them. Why don't we have a borrowers club? I think this is very new and very innovative. As for Security Council, it is a competition of military power. I mentioned the Ukraine war. If you can defend itself, Europe can defend itself, that's good. But you have umbrella. If your umbrella leaves, what are you going to do? I will not talk about Africa, because we hope that everyone can find their own place in the international system, and it's not true at the moment. Just a few weeks ago, in Africa, 40 military personnel, they can disrupt the government, and they can. This is something that we need to change. So now I'm thinking for GNF. I am very honored to have attended many GNF meetings in Beijing, and including those ministerial meetings. This organization is a culture organization in the first place, technology. But 20 years ago, this organization has experienced a sort of big change when two countries try to turn it into a political organization. For instance, the peace organization, peace movement, and then the GNF will lose its significance, its cultural significance. That's my personal perspective. For GNF, when it wants to interfere the peace and security issues, and I believe that is in the scope of the Security Council, we have to look into the origin of this organization. It's about the French and the French organization culture. Are we positioned to interfere in the security and the peace issues? We are a cultural organization, that is fair to say. So later on, we'll see in the Q&A where there are some more questions regarding multilateralism and reform of Security Council, the position of Africa. We'll see if there are new ideas coming up, or how can we reduce the importance of the impact of the superpowers to make the international organizations more democratic. Thank you very much. Just you mentioned the importance of peace. True, for international organizations, they can safeguard the security and peace. International organizations of all kinds, they need to safeguard the peace and the security. Now we are entering the Q&A session, the diplomats, the students, and ambassadors. Now the floor is open. Please raise your hand if you have any questions. And now the floor is open for the Chinese students.
展开，所以呢，大家如果有任何问题，可以举手。我们的志愿者
If I have any questions, and the microphone will be handed to you.
Nous allons poser des questions.
Okay, please put on your microphone because we're going to switch to different language. Now let's get ready. Any questions from the student diplomats in the audience? We have enough time. Now we would like to invite the student in the back row. You can introduce yourself in English and in Chinese.
就是我是大二的学生。
I'm from this University of Foreign Affairs, and my question is for you. Do you believe that for the United Nations, does it have any better ways to protect the interest of small countries? You want to ask a question to particular ambassador or 4 ambassadors? I want to ask the Senegal because they are a small country. Senegal.
Une question venant d'une étudiante en deuxième année de l'université.
So the moderator repeated the question. So this question is for the ambassador of Senegal. So ambassador, do you have any ideas to share on the topic of how to protect the interests of small countries, whether they are big or small in size? It doesn't mean they're not important. They're only small in size, but they can also be very strong. For example, Senegal is very strong in agriculture and industry, and Luxembourg is very strong in the financial system. So size doesn't matter. It is not equal to weakness. So this is what I want to repeat. Okay, please pass the floor to the ambassador of Senegal. How to protect the interests of the small countries? Thank you very much, dear student. When I was working at the United Nations, yes, indeed, I need to think about the balance between different organizations. Why do I say that? As you may know, we have the UN Security Council with 5 permanent members. What I want to add is that when we signed the United Nations Charter, some of the countries are against the veto power by major countries. But the Roosevelt administration of the United Nations said that if we do not have the veto power, the United Nations would be just like the club of the nations, the former organization preceding the United Nations. We know that most of the topics covered by the United Nations are about the peace and security in Africa. And a lot of African-related resolutions are actually drafted by Western countries. We cannot accept that. You talk about the conflicts in our continent, but we do not have the say, and can't we just draft the resolution by ourselves? And another important challenge is this: violation of the Charter of the United Nations. At the Security Council, some of the countries suggest the use of force to force a country to come back to peace. That doesn't work. According to Article 51 of the UN Charter. Sorry, the microphone doesn't work now. The interpreter cannot hear anything now. The interpreter cannot hear anything now. Okay. During the massacre in Rwanda, at that time I was working at the United Nations. At that time, the French diplomats. Okay, at that time, the question is this: how to make our voice heard on extreme cases, for example, the genocide on the Balkan Peninsula or the Rwanda massacre. But some of the countries, when they have the veto power, they will use it arbitrarily. You know, with the veto power, they don't want to go without this power. For example, China rejoined the United Nations in 1971, and China joined the Security Council, and we hope that we can get more interests and rights. We feel that Chinese representatives are there at the Security Council because we cannot be there, but China can speak for us at the Security Council. At the United Nations, we hope that the General Assembly of the United Nations will also have more power. For example, if anybody uses veto power at the Security Council, for example, in 1950, the war against Americans' aggression in the DPRK. At that time, the Soviet Union vetoed a resolution at the United Nations. It vetoed the entry of the Alliance Army to the DPRK. But the United States say, no, we want to enter the DPRK. So it could happen back then. Why can't it happen today? So we always talk about Security Council, but does it really support democracy? So a big country can just deny everything, whether it is a single country like Haiti or other countries. We are not at the Security Council. We just submit the power to other countries. But if we can ensure that all countries can vote, I think that will be more diplomatic. And we can build a more equitable international economic system. You know that the World Bank's attitude for Africa, it was just like in the 1940s and 50s. We could not accept that. We have over 50 countries in Africa, but we only have 3 representatives at the IMF. Only 2 persons work at the World Bank. Is it fair? In the Global South organizations, we hope that whether it is the World Bank or the IMF, we need the reforms of those organizations, especially on the topics of climate change, environmental protection, topics that concern the life and death of Africa. We want changes. We want to reflect the equity of all sovereign countries. That is the word-for-word respect for the Charter of the United Nations. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Ambassador of Mauritius. Thank you very much. My country is even smaller than your country and even smaller than Luxembourg. When the world is in a mess, there will always be the emergence of new organizations, for example, BRICS. First, I also want to thank the ambassadors in the panel discussion. Thank you for your insightful sharing, which really benefit a lot. And we can realize the crisis that multilateralism is in now. So we need to think about today's structure. So in the 1980s, the structure could not be the same as the 1940s and 50s. And for smaller countries, on some topics, for example, climate change, we need more representation. And the Paris Accord was signed. What happened? Nothing. Health issue, security issue, the funding for the Environment Fund, digital transformation, as mentioned by Ambassador of Luxembourg, all these need to be reformed. Where to start? That is my question.
A une question.
A question from Wang.
Ambassador's excellent discussion. I think this, I have a brief comment, but also a question. The multilateral system, but we talk a lot about UN reform, particularly UN Security Council reform. You know, I wrote an op-ed on the foreign policy recently. I was giving a proposal, which I think I can probably accommodate all the interest, is that you know, G20 represents 85% of the global GDP, so including African Union there. So what I propose is that maybe we should get the G20 into the Security Council. So we have 21 Security Council members. Right now we have 15. So if we have 21 Security Council members, the other 16 can be associate permanent member. And then the P5 still have the veto power, but the associate member may not have the veto power, but they have a collective veto power. The collective veto power is only when single P5 abuse the veto power. For example, Russia has abused over 120 times, 30 times. US abused about 100 times. And then UK is about 30 times. China is about 20 times. And France is about 18 times. So how to solve this one or two countries really over-abuse that unilateral vote, like on the Gaza issue and things like that. So my proposal would be that if only one single P5 veto, then that veto have to subject to the G21 of the Security Council members collective, vote on that. If it's 2/3 majority override that veto will not stand. But what about the other smaller countries? Other smaller countries, we could have another 2/3 override at the General Assembly. So two double override can veto a Security Council, one P5 abuse of the veto. So in that sense, that will reflect the multipolar board. I think that you're right. I mean, it's really a challenge. So I think G20, which including European Union, including African Union, will all be there, and that will really reflect the voice. I think even though they have associate member status, it's still better than not at the seat there, and then that will solve the problem for reflect this multipolar world. I mean, I have written that. I got a lot of good feedback on it. Yeah. So just brief comment.
Merci pour ce commentaire. Et je crois que nous avons aussi une intervention de l'ambassadeur de Bulgarie.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the ambassadors for their comments. And just now you have mentioned the veto power, but in UN Charter there does not exist a veto in UN Charter. I do not remember about the exact wording, but the collective voice of the permanent 5 members. Now, what does it mean? It means that a collective vote is not the single vote, veto power by single company. And the ambassador of Senegal just mentioned the I think the idea of a democracy is in conflict with the sovereignty of country, in democracy, the minority will listen to the majority. It means that some of the countries, their interests have to be sacrificed, and because they are the minority. This is democracy. So I will try to be brief, and we can continue our discussion in the launching. One more question. For the Korean War, the Soviet Union representatives, they were not in the Security Council, and there's no way that they could exercise their veto power. Thank you. Any more questions? The last two questions. Good morning. I want to thank Dr. Wang for the invitation. I'm from the Central Africa. And we are benefiting from the UN system. In 1963, we were independent. At that time, the UN sent a mission to our country. In the south of our country at that time, wanted to be independent. They want to declare independence. So my question is, this international organization's international system, where is their efficiency? The Bulgarian ambassador mentioned the democracy.
Nos empires ont évolué de quelle façon? Donc, jusqu'aujourd'hui, avec
Actually, in African continents, there are many smaller empires. We had a multilateralism, but there is no integration. That is the issue of Africa.
Nous sommes vraiment dans la compréhension du monde.
Do we understand the world? Do we have a proper understanding of the world today? That is my question for all the ambassadors. If there are no interference, military interference, can we have independence? Is it a curse for Africa? We have 10 minutes. Now let's... who would you like to ask a question to? And one question from students as well. So we will gather or collect the question first and then put these questions to our speakers, to our panelists. One student asked a question. Now we are collecting the questions and then ask the ambassadors. I'm from University of the Foreign Trade.
Also for the representative from Senegal, because you mentioned that you were also working for the United Nations. Because as what I observed in Addis Ababa, that the UN system and its agencies is slowing down. So basically in our office, we hold discussions after discussions, conference after conference, but the result is that we reach nothing. And the same thing is happening every day. The money is spent, but nothing is achieved. I have friends working in UNICEF, in UN Women, and also in the World Resources Institute. But I think that these institutions and organizations are becoming more symbolic instead of concrete and solid. So how can we solve this kind of problem to prevent the money being wasted and to do something real and solid? Thank you very much. Merci.
Merci pour votre question. Et il me semble que l'ambassadeur du Bénin a aussi également une question. Comme ça, on collecte toutes les questions.
My question is very simple. I hope that we do not live in illusion. We have to face the reality. We should not avoid the realities. We haven't defined yet the concept of multilateralism. Well, there are many aspects, many perspectives on the reality. If you're American, you have different perspectives from Africans, from Europeans, from Chinese. We should not live in illusions, because at the end of the day, there are no friends between countries, they're only interests.
Thank you very much. Ambassador of Burundi, do you have any questions? Thank you very much. I don't know whether this is a comment or a question. I just want to say something. The panelists have fully discussed this topic, especially about some principles, and these principles are sacred. That includes the holiness of the UN Charter, the equality of sovereign states, the respect for sovereignty. We have a lot of practical issues, and we are living in this real world. We know that just now, Luxembourg ambassador mentioned on many occasions the topic of Russia-Ukraine war and other topics. Some of the countries believe that we have different perspectives among different countries. Probably we may have some debate with each other when it comes to disagreements. Probably we may believe that now there are double standards. So when such things happen, it will definitely weaken the value of multilateralism and the weight of multilateralism. In this world of multilateralism, probably it is not just about a question. I just want to say something. I just want to exchange views with all of you. So we have different ideas how to discuss this topic. For some holy or sacred principles, we may have different definitions. In the first place. Second, I also want to talk about the importance of solidarity. Solidarity is a value upheld by the Francophone group, and probably even on this topic we may have different ideas. As you may say, some of the big countries, some of the small countries may have their own different subjective definitions on this topic, and they cannot reach any consensus actually. No matter what, however, for the young people, we need to talk about the importance of solidarity, no matter which is your position. We know that some of the countries are big, some are small, some are strong, some are weak, some are young, some are old. We must emphasize the value and importance of solidarity in order to strengthen multilateralism. So we mentioned the topic of solidarity. I have a question for the 4 ambassadors. So how to raise the work related to Africa in terms of efficiency in international organizations? In particular, in today's world, what is the prospect for multilateralism? Okay, Ambassador of Senegal. I will answer your question very briefly. Our students and the ambassador of Burundi made some comments. I want to give you a brief response on Africa. On the topic of responsibility, this continent has been plagued by colonialism and slavery, just like the history of China or the Balkan Peninsula. So we are facing a lot of challenges of governance. Africa was liberated in 1963, and the African Liberation Organization and the AU were established to solve the problem of borders, because the borders were written by the colonists. So it created a lot of conflicts on African peace and security. Probably you know that at FOCAC, we often discuss the topic of China-Africa Economic and Trade Cooperation, but without the peace and security, we will not be able to develop the economy and business cooperation, and we will not be able to realize technology transfer from China. On the topic of terrorism, do you still remember Libya? Who invaded Libya? In 2001, NATO invaded Libya. Who allowed it to invade Libya? In 2011, it was the Security Council. After 2011, they created trouble in sub-Saharan area, and in southern Africa it is true, and in the Central Republic of Africa that is also true. So we must have peace and security. Article 7 of the United Nations Charter said that you need to have the responsibility to protect peace. But why can you be allowed to invade Libya? That was also true for the Korean War. Yes, the Soviet Union did not use the veto power, but at that time, 9 members said that we must maintain agreement. We hope that the African conflict will be reduced. And in FOCAC, we made it very clear that African issues must be handled by the African people themselves. In Addis Ababa, we have the AU headquarters, and in different parts of Africa. We have the ECOWAS, the Western Africa Community. We have different sub-organizations in different parts of Africa. We have the charter to allow the Western Africa community and other subcontinental organizations to send troops. But the fund should be provided by the United Nations. The United Nations issued the plans for peacekeeping, but they do not follow up with the funding. So that is always a lasting challenge to us. I'm not saying that we need to ensure equality for all, because we have over 50 countries in Africa, and all of the governments have different approaches. They cannot always be the same. Some of the countries pay more attention to long-lasting peace and security. Some of the countries want fast reforms, but no matter what, without conflicts, with conflict, there will be no way for development. Then the Sudanese conflict is really astonishing.
Et c'est des conflits qui risquent même de déstabiliser toute la.
This is a shame for us. We have to go back to the origin of multilateralism. Multilateralism is not dying. I do not believe in Europe and the United States, but I believe in multilateralism. We have to be frank and open-minded and be frank in our discussion. That is from bottom of my heart. Central Africa and Sub-Sahara, there are some conflicts, but behind there are some power. So it's not that African cannot manage the govern the Africa. It's not we cannot do it, but we can't have done well in security. From the ambassador of Morocco, what is your point of view? What are we discussing about? We're democratic countries, state, nations. We're discussing democratic countries, democracies. During the COVID, everyone is talking about freedom and sovereignty. But we see that during the COVID, everyone is taking care of themselves. So I first would like to respond to Dr. Wang. I do not believe an organization can represent any country. We are discussing this in Africa. We are discussing whether the Security Council should expand its membership, giving a member a seat to Africa. Some African countries say yes, but that does not work. There is no African country can represent the whole African continent. Every African country has its own interests. No African country can be designated as the representative to the Security Council of the United Nations, and no single African country can have the trust of all African countries. I have been visiting the African countries. I've been to all the African continent. I have different views. Africa to a new high. The improved status of Africa, I do not believe that. We have too many bottlenecks. We have too many difficulties and challenges. Many countries internally and also with the neighbors, they have major conflicts, a lot of disappointment in Africa. All the big African projects are empty talks. Like no weapons in Africa, that's empty. And also African Free Trade Zone. Well, now it only had 8 members. We have infrastructure problems, we have poverty issues. These are about governance, lack of governance. The foreign military interference is not the only problem. We have talked about it a lot. But we have it is true, but we also have our own issues in terms of governance. We have many, like the Congo has won its independence for 17 years. What is the status quo? We can't believe it. If you go there and have a look, it has gone independence for 6 decades, but nothing has been achieved. We are speechless, so we cannot say that we cannot just pointing figures at foreign forces, foreign interference. It's not working. We have to be realistic. The African issues, African countries share the responsibilities. Or there are some foreign interferences into African continent. But what about like the Caribbean countries, the Latin America countries, and the Middle East? They haven't had any communication exchanges with us. Thank you. The ambassador of Luxembourg, anything to say? Well, for the question from the student, you have been working as an intern in Addis Ababa. You were very disappointed. You are very disappointed. I can see that. Let me answer your question. Personally, I have had experience working with the UNDP. For Luxembourg, we are a contributor. We know that UN agencies have the issue of low efficiency. We have been discussing this issue internally, but I think don't be too disappointed, don't be pessimistic. I have been involved in a mission in Asia for UNDP. It's a small country not far away from China. My mission was about how to involve the poorest people in the country in the economic development. We have been thinking about it for a long time. We have discussed with the country's leaders, and then the country decided to have tax reform. For SMEs and MSMEs, this was like 20 years ago. Several months ago, I checked their status quo, and I found that their tax regime is still running, and people are getting rich. And many SMEs are joining the economic development. The informal work jobs can also join the economic development and to reduce the burden on them. I think this is a very positive example. You can't see this in the news. And not much money has been spent. It's only a tax reform and some legal reform, adding some articles on tax. Another example is a country not far away from Senegal. The school enrollment, primary school enrollment, has been improved by 43%, and that was at the end of 1990s. 12 years later, that figure has been improved to 19%, while the population increases by 3%. So can you understand that? The school enrollment increased hugely. How does that happen? Because the leadership of the country had the decision, had the determination to invest in education. The government involved all stakeholders and forced them to implement this project to increase this school enrollment and to invest in education. The World Bank, who is a fund contributor or the borrower, the lender to the project, once they want to withdraw, and the country said no. We, at the time, were a member of the board for the World Bank. So you can see that is a very positive example of multilateralism. Of course, there are some negative examples. It's not that development will happen automatically or when with the foreign investment. The local leaders, they need to have the courage. They need to brave. China is a very good example in this respect. In this aspect. So there are differences. There are success, there are failures, there are hope, there are disappointment. Now the United Nations is experiencing a financial crisis, and it is also a perfect time for us to rethink about reform.
Any comments from the Ambassador of Canada? I don't have anything new to add because all of you have covered a lot. I just want to say that we are living in a world of problems. We are at a transitional point. It's a historical crossroad. A lot of countries are making preparations for this, including the suggestions made by Dr. Henry Wang. Those ideas really need us to be creative. The only thing we can do is to work slowly and we will develop a new system when things are really at the worst, because the current system doesn't work very well, we know. So we need to take some measures to prepare for that moment, to prepare for the right moment to come. Thank you very much for your last comment. Today, we have talked about Palestine, Ukraine, and Sudan, and international development topics. So I want to thank you all for your presence. I think our discussions are very pragmatic, and also our discussions are full of wisdom. The ambassadors have come up with very important suggestions. I think I still want to point to the importance of national sovereignty and the importance of solidarity, and also the importance of development and respect for sovereignty. Thank you very much. Thank you again. I want to thank you all for the wonderful discussions. I want to thank the ambassadors, I want to thank the panelists, and also the moderator. And now may I invite you to put your earpieces on your chairs, and we will go to the back of the room to have some food. Thank you again for your presence. I'm looking forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much.